Do you leave every doctor's appointment with more prescriptions and referrals and also more questions? Oh, friend, you're in the right place. I'm Kayla, registered nurse and personal medical strategist, and here every week we're going to work together to cut through the noise, connect the dots, and finally get you the real plan you deserve. Let's dive in. Hey, welcome back to the podcast. If you have ever wondered if your medications could be part of the problem, this episode is for you. When I was a brand new baby nurse and totally new to the world and the realities of healthcare, I used to think that the more medication somebody was on, the more cared for they were. And on the surface, like that makes sense, right? Because wow, look at all of this medical attention. They're really getting help. Um, and even societally, we've kind of been conditioned to have this expectation that we can almost measure our care by what the doctor is doing for us. And here in America, that measuring stick often is prescriptions. And sometimes to the point where we're looking at prescriptions instead of how healthy somebody actually feels. When there can be this sense of when you go to the doctor and you leave with a prescription that you're doing something about your health, that you're taking the steps, and that is the comfort zone that people fall into with this thinking. But what I've seen time and time again is that often the longer that medication list gets, the worse people actually feel. And initially I thought it was because, oh, they have so many medications because they have so many medical conditions, and it's all of those conditions that are actually what's causing them to feel unwell. And believe me, the world is not black and white. There's 10,000 shades of nuance around that. But there are certainly too many people who become victimized by over medication and don't even realize what's happening. I had this woman one day came into the ER when I was still working bedside, and she had literally 20 medications listed on her chart. She wasn't elderly, she wasn't dying, she was just stuck in this system and tired, dizzy, foggy, miserable. Everybody said she's complicated. She wasn't complicated. The healthcare system made her that way. And after that experience is when I started to look at things in a different light and started to ask more questions. Because, yes, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Medication absolutely has a place. It is supposed to be a tool, not the whole plan. When the tool becomes the plan, that's when people stop getting better and are getting stuck. And let me take a step back and say, particularly in the lens of chronic ongoing medical conditions, when we're talking about something acute like an infection, yes, typically you take antibiotics, the infection clears, and that's the end of the story. Please know that for the rest of this episode, that is not what we are talking about here. So, to make this a little easier to understand, let's talk about it in the lens of a discussion I was having recently with somebody. We'll call her Emily. She's in her 30s, works full time, keeps the family running, takes care of the kids, house manager, all the things, right? And over the past year, she's been more exhausted in dealing with brain fog and just not feeling herself. She's gone to the doctor, done the labs, everything comes back normal. And so her doctor said to her, "You're probably just anxious." And she's feeling kind of anxious, so she went with that. And she walks out with a prescription for 10 milligrams of Lexapro. He said, "Let's start here and see how it does." Well, at first it helped a little. She was feeling less panicky and more focused, but then a few months went by and she feels like she's dragging again. Now she noticed she's gaining weight as well. And emotionally, she's no longer dealing with the low lows, but she doesn't have her highs either. And she's just feeling numb or flat. Went back to the doctor, and her doctor said, any guesses here? Let's up the dose. It was at that point that something in her gut said, hold on a second, maybe this isn't the right path. And then that's when she started having a conversation with me. And honestly, that's that moment where your gut says, I don't know about this. It's the moment that most people ignore. But it's the one that I want you to pay attention to because while this story is about an antidepressant, this theme is not just about antidepressants. It's all medications in a chronic health setting. And that flicker of this doesn't feel right is worth listening to and investigating to help protect yourself from the cascade of over medication. You should know your medications the way you know your passwords, which means if you have to have them written down, that's okay. Please write them down. But I want you to know what it's for, what it's called, both names, but also what side effects it can cause. That's the piece that a lot of people, it gets forgotten about. And the big one is what changed before you started feeling worse. Here's what can be tricky about medications is sometimes people will take a prescription for years and then later on develop issues or side effects with it when something else has changed with their body. Or sometimes your body changes all the time. And sometimes you can develop an adverse reaction or a side effect to something that didn't bother you before. So just because nothing has changed on the timing doesn't rule out a medication side effect. Just a little caveat I want to put there. Like I said a few minutes ago, medication really is a very nuanced, individualized topic. And unfortunately, it doesn't always get that level of dedicated attention that it truly should get in a provider's office when you're, rushing through this 15-minute appointment and they're just trying to figure out what to do with you. So, what is a medication cascade? Let me pause and say that. Maybe you've experienced this before, or maybe you know somebody who has, but I've seen it a lot, unfortunately. And a person gets started on a medication and then they develop a side effect. And then they get put on another medication to manage the side effects of that medication. And then another one. And then before you know it, you're on a whole chemistry set of pharmaceuticals that you can hardly keep track of when you're supposed to take what and who's on first. What I want you to know is that a bridge does not equal a destination. What do I mean by that? Medication can absolutely help you feel better. But the sneaky side of it is that it can quietly keep you stuck. A prescription is supposed to act as a bridge to help get you stabilized and feeling better, and then to work on investigating the root cause of what caused the issue in the first place. When a prescription becomes the plan, it actually turns into a cage because now you're stuck chemically dependent on something, particularly when we are talking about psychiatric type medications. It's not something you can easily start and stop. And the relief that they bring, it's not the same thing as a resolution to what is underpinning all of it. That's the truth that most people don't hear from their doctor, is that these medications can create the right environment for healing, but it doesn't actually do the healing. What do I mean by that? In the thought process behind these, in particular, antidepressants and things like that, is that it helps to restore the neurotransmitter balance in your brain that is out of balance for whatever reason. And restoring that balance for most people will help you to feel better. But something caused the imbalance in the first place. Something caused the depression, the anxiety, etc. And when we just focus on the relief that is felt from that bottle and we stop getting curious about why we're having that issue in the first place, yeah, that's how you end up stuck in that cycle. We've done a really great job. Well, we've done a good job of destigmatizing mental health, thank God. But sometimes I almost feel like we're starting to swing the pendulum too far in the other direction. I mean, to the point where I saw a t-shirt for sale recently that said, "Hey, if you can't make your own neurotransmitter, store-bought is fine too." And that sometimes that's true, but not if the pills become the only plan. If you've ever taken an antidepressant or really any chronic medication, here's what you need to know. It is okay to need that help. It is okay to take the pill, but the goal should be to use it as a launch pad. Again, create that environment for healing, not a lifelong label. Because the thing that actually helps people heal and change your health is what happens after the prescription. So, this is where we want to start going from the symptom medication loop and exiting by finding the root cause path. You can't medicate your way out of something that you need to work your way through. If you only treat the symptoms, you stay in the loop around and around. And for most people, eventually that medication stops being as effective as it once was. And so we up the dose or we add on another one. And every time we're doing this, we are exposing ourselves to more and more of that associated risk. And the cascade of medications continues. Managing your symptoms will keep you surviving, but understanding them actually helps you to heal. And that's what I want for you. Because especially when we're talking about in the setting of anxiety or depression, those medications certainly help keep you out of the low lows, but they also take you out of the high highs and leave you feeling numb or flat. And, sometimes numb is better than in pain, but not for your whole life. What is the point of life with no joy? And it's the hard stuff. Everybody says, "Oh, you need therapy." And like, yeah, you probably do. And at the same time, I recognize how challenging that can be. I myself have gone through a string of terrible therapists trying to find one that fit. I had one lady who spent more of the session talking about her cats than listening to me. I had another lady who, once I shared everything with her, she was honestly blown away and kind of impressed with how well I'd been managing to hold everything together. Very validating, but had no useful strategies to give me. And I was like, well, great. Like, I'm not looking for a friend, I want to figure out how to move through this. So I know that it's not as simple as like, oh, just see therapy. But all at the same time, don't give up on yourself. It's so hard. This is the hard stuff of life. But like, here's one thing that I have learned is that life is going to be hard. The good news is we get to choose our hard. It's hard because we are taking the steps to move towards healing, and it's painful and difficult, especially when we don't feel like it. Um, or it's hard because you stay stuck exactly where you are. Choose your hard. I hope you choose the hard pathway that leads somewhere better, a better destination. Use that medication as the bridge. Um, and let's get to the root cause, addressing the trauma. Maybe it's through podcasts or audiobooks. You would be surprised. Self-help books, for whatever reason, have such a like a joking stigma around them. But when I couldn't find a good therapist, I made incredible slow but incredible progress through finding the right podcasts and blogs that helped me to process what I was dealing with and reframe things and understand myself and my history in a better light and make peace with it. Um, it's also really important to note that, I don't hear this talked about all that often, but your neurotransmitters, your homemade ones, they actually start in your gut, which makes sense if we think about it. Because when oftentimes when if we're in that state of, not feeling well, depressed, anxious, whatever, we can have this really a common thing is to default to like the easy path on things. And like I get it, like your spoons are low. But what that often turns into is fast food, convenience food, boxed items. And we know that these kill your gut microbiome and your flora where your neurotransmitters are made. So of course then you get caught in this vicious loop of the things that you're feeding yourself, not nourishing, killing the guys that make the neurotransmitters, and then the neurotransmitters are low. So then you take the packaged ones, but then still there's this gap of addressing what's really going on, and again, opening to that whole cascade. So I know it's hard, and I know that there is an answer for you. What is that going to be? Everybody's is different. Everybody's health journey is different, mental health especially. There is not a one size fits all, but I hope that that gives you some ideas. Lean on the people you do have in your support system. Be more open. Share what you need. If you are going to go for prepackaged food, let's not just grab the most immediate thing or like the highest craving item, but can we upgrade that a little more? There are meal delivery services that make wholesome, fresh meals. There are really cheap and easy to prepare healthy foods that will help to nourish your body. Maybe we can still satisfy that craving a little bit and kind of follow that 80-20 principle where we're focusing 80% on our healthy, nourishing food and that 20% to scratch that itch of the cravings and, what is going to give you that little dopamine hit to feel a little bit better right now, but ultimately not throwing off the whole kit and caboodle. I don't know. I could go on with probably 50 more things, but the point is that there there is another answer, and don't feel bad about taking the medication, but also don't let your providers act like the medication is the only plan. It comes out that way because writing a prescription it's easy. It's what they're trained on in medical school. It's what most patients have go into appointments expecting from their providers. So that your providers end up with more kind of that social influence and expectation that people want medications. And honestly, there's a lot of invisible forces at work too, right? Medications are profitable, especially if we can put somebody on a medication for life and a medication that might then create the need for more medications. Great. Pharma and your insurance company loves that setup. So there's things behind the scene, the man behind the curtain pulling the levers, but you can raise your hand and say, those levers are not for me. Um, if this hits home for you, here's what I want you to do tonight. Go home, grab a notebook, and write down every medication or supplement you take. And then next to each one, I want you to write why you were started on it, and when's the last time that it was reevaluated by a professional, either the initial prescriber, your primary care, who should be the one coordinating all of the medications, or even a pharmacist who medication is their specialty. Um, that's it. Just start getting curious. And if you're going through that process and all of this is starting to feel really tangled, or if you do have that voice in your gut that is saying, "Oh, I think that this challenge is like, this is what's happening to me," then reach out, go to herdforlife.com. Let's do a medical roadmap and get this sorted out with the actual strategies that are going to work for you in your real life and real set of circumstances. Or if you know somebody who you're listening to this and you're like, oh man, that sounds like my cousin Joe. He's drowning in prescriptions and not getting any better. Please send this to them. Because sometimes all it takes is for someone to hear that you're not broken. You just have the wrong plan. Don't you go to another appointment unprepared. Head on over to herdforlife.com/guide and get my free doctor's appointment prep guide so you can start getting the answers you need and get off the medical merry-go-round. I'll see you next week.